or a hotel, a traditional farm or a server farm. Introducing Hacienda Castilla. St. Matthew's Assurance presents a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Over 800 square miles of pristine, uninhabited coastal property in central Chile, ready for industrial, business, and residential development. Hacienda Castilla features almost unlimited open spaces and some of the most beautiful beaches in South America. With parcels ranging from 20 acres to over 200 acres, Hacienda Castilla will be adjacent to Copia Port A, the deepest natural port in all of South America. Experience future-forward development limited only by your imagination. What will you create at Hacienda Castilla? Become part of something completely new. For more, visit haciendacastilla.net today.
Hey, Lisa.
Hi, Todd. How are you today?
There we go. The mute button. Yeah, doing fine. Happy Monday. Thank you for joining us for Truth Be Told. Happy to see you. We've got S2 today. S2. Now, I've known this gentleman for some time. He's incognito. He comes from military intelligence. He's a Marine. I don't know what else you know, but it's going to be an interesting conversation.
Well, it's going to be a very interesting conversation. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and you and I were talking just briefly before, so people that may not want to watch all the way through, you'll find it elucidating. Metabiota comes right in here. Oracle, Larry Ellison, who else? What else?
Well, Palantir is involved. They've got, a very lucrative and influential role that's been, I think we're seeing, my take on it is we're seeing things that look like they're just developing, but our research is showing that this has been the relationships have been established for quite some time.
Yes, they have. And you know what? It all goes back to medical martial law, doesn't it? Every little bit of it. My Lord, here we go again. It almost reminds me, Lisa, of the last time around. This is like COVID 2.0. Where we said to the Trump administration, beware, mRNA has gene modification properties. And by the way, there's antifreeze in it, and yet nobody in the government did anything to stop the machine. And here now we've got 500 billion that's going to go towards this project that they call Operation Stargate. Like warp speed wasn't bad enough. Anyway, we're going to try and make some sense of that. But I've got a little bit of a prelude before you come back and join us
with S2.
To it. Yeah, let's see where this goes. It'll be fun. So thank you, Lisa, for that and all the wonderful research you do that helps us understand this crazy chessboard we call life. Wow. I confess to you being tired, a little bit overwhelmed by it all. Because it seems as though we happened upon the Achilles heel of this plan. The plan of the owners requires us all to get this mRNA in our bodies. And once the mRNA is in our bodies, they genetically transform us. The nanobots are part of the hydrogel. And then what they do is they hook you into the 5G system, or maybe even 6G as the case may be. Play that first clip if you wouldn't mind, Melissa. We'll set the stage here a little bit.
Video any different? Well, I've personally read through over 1,000 pages of declassified Stargate material, including the 183-page evaluation report that ultimately convinced the CIA to end the program in 1995. Let me tell you, this is not exactly a simple cut and dry topic. The CIA did cancel the program, and yeah, they had a good reason to, which is extremely misunderstood, and we'll be exploring that in detail. But despite all this, what they found over 23 years of experiments was compelling evidence that psychic abilities are real. Now,
yeah, the psychic abilities are real. So the CIA's Operation Stargate, I didn't know, went all the way back into the 1970s, and then they formalized it Along the way, they basically had people acting as remote viewers. They authenticated it. People were able to hook themselves into this connected consciousness, this stream. Melissa, if you go ahead and put up the document I sent you, there is a declassified version of the Freedom of Information Act request. And it's fascinating when you read through it. There's a highlighted portion right there. And effectively, what it is they're talking about in relation to this Operation Stargate is whether or not test subjects would be entitled to informed consent. Well, informed consent happens when you are experimenting upon people, which, by the way, the definition of a human under the PubMed taxonomy is a species to be experimented upon. So why are we not understanding that this is a great giant experiment? And it looks to me as people are hooked in to the Wi-Fi, people are hooked into the cell phone network, that maybe that is what they're talking about in terms of the connected consciousness. It's a compelling argument that I've heard Elon Musk make, that we are in fact already cyborgs because we're effectively attached to our phones, and all the data that we're getting is coming in from the Ethernet, the Internet of Things, now the Internet of Bodies. But I want to go back a little bit and refresh people's memories that all of this has to do with the implantation of devices, whether that device is a causative agent. Those words are very important. Lisa McGee will remind you of this. Whether that is a new type of disease, for example, genetic programming. So go back to the 1980s to the father of vaccinology at Merck, Maurice Hilleman, the senior vaccinologist. He was really the first guy in the world. And he's the guy talking about what it is that he decided to put in the vaccines. This is really interesting. SV40. Where have you heard about that one before? You have it queued up, Melissa?
Effects. Mm-hmm. And he said, "What?" I said, "Cancer."
I love it. I love it. Go ahead.
No. I said, "Albert," I said, you probably think I'm nuts, but I just have that feeling. Well, in the meantime, we had taken this virus and put it into into hamsters.
Uh-huh.
So we had this meeting, and that was sort of the topic of the day, and the jokes that were going around was, gee, we would win the Olympics because the Russians were only loaded down with tumors. This is where the vaccine was being tested. This was
yeah, right.
Anderson.
Right.
So, and it really destroyed the meeting. You know, it was a big interaction.
Yeah.
Yeah, so do me a favor, and you can go to that link. It's in the description, and watch the whole thing through. It's so disturbing that you hear the laughter in the background. The guy admits, or maybe he's bragging about discovering the SV40. Those are immortal cancer cells in the green monkeys he was using to make the vaccines. And he discovers this along with AIDS, and then decides, hey, why don't we put that in the shots? And what we'll do is we'll make the Russians all sick with tumors and kill them from cancer. In 1980, two things to take away from that. Number one, you understand now the kind of person behind this, behind vaccinology, and the malintent that they had for all of these years. That was 1980. They've been at this for a very long time, poisoning people. Cancer didn't even really exist prior to the 1800s. So where did this all come from? Guys like him. The other thing to take away from this is somehow they were experimenting these vaccines on Russians. Well, we were in war, a Cold War with the Russians back in the 80s. How did that happen? And it's the same experience I had in Cuba, which is the vaccine law. Vaccine use is universal, and they share the science between countries, and scientists abound. The only difference is that they're looking for ways to kill everybody versus us, stupid human tricks. We're trying to save everybody. So I want you to understand that it's not just a function of mentality, being bad at Merck. This is a shared mentality amongst all of the scientists. And he talks about disclosing this to other Russian scientists, but they laugh about giving people cancer anyway. Ha ha, they're going to have tumors. What kind of a sick person does that? So when President Trump makes announcements about using mRNA, which is a gene modification technology, we all know that now, designed to hook people into the Internet of Things. Play the next clip. It just disturbs me.
From Obama, Barry Soetoro, that over the last 10 years, from Obama, Barry Soetoro, to Joe Biden, to Donald Trump, have been talking about a cancer vax promise because they are attempting to edit your genetic code. I mentioned years ago how there was going to be a switch after the corona outbreak, how they were going to need to pivot to get people on board with getting this in you, because it's all about editing your genetic structure.
Yeah, he's right. He's absolutely right. It's all about editing your genetic structure. For those of you that have been with us for a while, you would know that cancer was cured 40-something years ago. For the last 40 years, Professor Stanislaw Brzezinski from Poland, a Texas licensed doctor, has cured every form of cancer for 40 years. And for so doing, he was twice prosecuted by the U.S. Department of Justice. Here's the good professor right now.
Here, the patient has to go to very difficult bureaucratic process, which usually most of the patients will not be able to go through because they die during the process. For some reason, they don't want to have cure of cancer.
Yeah.
My name is...
That's okay. You can watch the rest of it on your own time. I highly recommend watching that documentary because Professor Brzezinski has it exactly right. The bureaucratic process in the FDA for investigative new drugs is so lengthy that people die waiting just to join in a clinical trial. I personally know a lady who's had a cure for autism for the last 20 years and cannot get through the FDA process. Why? Because the FDA doesn't want to cure autism. The FDA doesn't want to cure cancer. All they do is make it possible to poison us, not to make us healthy. So please take it into the back of your mind and keep it there handy and fresh. Cancer is a Trojan horse. Use of mRNA is a Trojan horse. It is all designed to integrate your body into the Internet of Bodies, the Internet of Things, and the Google Mesh Network. And that's already happened. And ladies and gentlemen, digital ID is a part of this. If you haven't figured it out, please drink some coffee, wake up, watch some of our past episodes, and you'll get there. Today, we've got some extra information on this. Our wonderful Lisa McGee, who has researched dutifully all of this stuff, but also S2, a loyal Marine, a friend of mine. He's been helping in the background for certainly the last 5 years, trying to stop the shots, trying to stop the destruction of our nation. With that said, welcome S2 and welcome Lisa. Happy Monday, and God bless you both for being here.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah, S2, I want to get right to you. Audience knows Lisa. Everybody knows Lisa. So give us a little bit of background, would you? Oh, if you've got audio. Or did we lose him?
Sorry, I was on mute. Can you hear me?
That's okay. Yeah, now we got you.
Okay. So I'm going to make a correction from the initial introduction. I'm not from military intelligence. I was your regular run-of-the-mill Marine Corps grunt. I did a tour of duty in the Marine Corps. How I came to be known as S2 is I had been affiliated with Jeffrey Prather for a good number of years. And when he started Team America, I came in and basically proved my OSINT capabilities, and he appointed me the S2 for Team America HQ. So S2 is a designation for intelligence officer, intelligence analyst. At any rate, that was how I came into this space. This was about 5 years ago. I've known Jeffrey for probably 25 years, and I had something that happened to me back in it was 2020 it happened. And it's interesting that we talk about the psychic capabilities because I sort of had a spiritual psychic awakening that happened to me, was very eye-opening. that I was sitting at my desk one day, and all of a sudden something hit me, and I went into the only thing that I can describe as a hypnotic trance, where I was conscious but not conscious. I was aware of everything that was going on around me, but what I saw in my mind's eye was like a movie screen. You know how they say, watch your life flash before your eyes? Well, that's what I saw. I saw a series of images and words and activities and events unfolding in my mind's eye. And at the very end of that movie reel, the word control popped up in my head. And this came just after I got a phone call from somebody, a fellow that I knew from the Army, that called me up the very day that they announced the first case coming out of Wuhan in China. And he asked me, "What do you know about mRNA?" And I said, "The only thing that I can tell you about it, because I did work for the government at one point in time, I worked for NIH, and I worked side by side with scientists who'd been fooling around with this stuff for years." And I told him, I said, "All I know is that we shouldn't be fooling with it."
Yeah, don't open the box.
Yeah.
Disassemble.
And at that point, I'm not going to tell you what base he called me from, but let's just put it this way: it had to do with germ warfare. And he told me, he said, "Well, they're getting ready to release something in 30 days."
Oh,
And I said,
Wow.
"Oh, really?" He goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, I guess the only thing we can do is wait and see what happens." And then, sure enough, the case from China popped up on the radar,
yeah.
and all of a sudden, there we were.
Yeah, there we were. So I find that to be interesting and compelling because we've got other whistleblowers from what is commonly referred to as the bioweapons laboratory of the United States, otherwise known as Fort Detrick. Theoretically, they stopped operations for offensive biological weapons. I think way back in the 80s, if memory serves. But yet carried on, and we've got a lot of whistleblowers saying much of the same thing. And not only that, but one of our star whistleblowers, Teresa Long, who was formerly trained in CBRN, she trained in CBRN, and said, "Look, it would have taken years and years to put together all of these tests for what came out of the COVID shots." I'm curious if you had any follow up with this person
No, I haven't heard from him since.
since.
Yeah.
Well, that's rather ominous. Okay, so
Yeah, and
going back to those days,
he's a good friend of mine too, which makes it even more odd.
yeah, I would say all those years later. And one of the ways that I think you and I met was we were working on the quarantine camps circa 2021, and I recall getting some information about intergovernmental agreements between the federal government and the state of state of Arizona and Cochise County in particular. They were releasing funding, to build these quarantine camps, effectively a private prison. And I can't remember where you fit into that, Webb, but my recollection is that was in your backyard.
Well, yeah, there were I think I had some involvement in that, but I had been working with another researcher that had like 4 terabytes of data. I've been trying to get some of her data, but she's kind of dropped off the radar now, like a lot of people have. But she basically uncovered the government's plan, the entire plan, that they were basically going to start separating kids from parents and putting kids into their own little camps, and then taking the parents and moving them elsewhere. But this was a military operation that was to take place. And I truly believe that through the dissemination of information that's coming out, not just from you, but from a lot of other people, including myself, that we managed to interdict this and screw up their plans.
Amen.
Well, we did to some extent, but I would say this: we had a heck of a time trying to represent parents who were losing their kids anyway to Child Protective Services. I mean, any complaint from anybody would yield this result where they show up, knock on your door, and take your kids. It didn't matter the circumstances, even in hospitals where doctors wanted to experiment on babies with lung transplants for no reason. If the family said, "No, we're not going to do that," they would take the kids and cart them away. And that's the other part of what it is that you do, S2, is you are in the interdiction of child predators. Did I have that right?
correct. There for a while there wasn't a day that went by that I wasn't asked to track. If I would find certain individuals or organizations, there wasn't a day that went by that I wasn't asked to find certain people and find their locations and things like that, find out their activities
Yeah.
and their financial information. And I would pass that information along. I even worked with James O'Keefe for a little bit there with stuff that was going on down at the border with child trafficking. I gave him a lot of information, but the thing that became very frustrating to me about all of that was no matter how much information I gave to people that they asked for, nobody was doing anything with it.
Yeah.
And I really became very vocal about this. Probably about a year or two ago, because nobody was doing anything with any of the information that I had. In fact, I sent you a map out of something that I came across that linked child trafficking down at the border to the Office of Refugee and Resettlement as well as DHS.
There you go.
I sent you the financial information for the grants and things that they were giving out to these organizations, but the dollar amounts and everything.
Yes.
In fact, I even tracked in that document certain paramilitary contractors back to this grant program.
Exactly that. And that is where the confluence, one of the reasons why Lisa is here, there's a confluence of all of this to child trafficking as it relates to, believe it or not, the bioweapons themselves and Ukraine. So Lisa and Oracle. So here we have this this disclosure, this announcement by President Trump. Here's Larry Ellis. He's going to save the world with his computer programming. We just need some mRNA and $500 billion and everything's going to be better. And somehow Metabiota, Hunter Biden, the big fella, are invested in this, and they were running biolabs in Ukraine. So all of this somehow comes together. Lisa, jump in here if you wouldn't mind. How does the money link back in Metabiota, do you recall, in the child trafficking business out of Ukraine?
Well, you know, we discovered what we think is that we found the lab in Ukraine that was donated by all the labs that we found, 12 that were donated by the DOD. You know, they didn't say they were funded by the DOD. On the contracts and receipts that we found, it said that they were donated. But we found all of these ingredients, chemicals that are primed with the bacteria that go into these vaccines. And it isn't just the mRNA, it is, you know, a plethora of vaccines and pharmaceuticals are barcoded. Those are identifiers. So they're track and tracers that when they're administered, and when you have Child Protective Services or, you know, the community that's getting free assistance, you know, and Medicaid, and you know that's just an arena where they can just pump up these kids and track them. Yes. But you,
and these international organizations are trading in kids, so we wonder how it is that they come across the border. And I remember seeing Metabiota hooked in with, it was the UNHCR, it had grants from there. And then we saw other grant money seeming related to their operations in Ukraine, had nothing to do with pharmaceuticals. It's almost as though that Metabiota was their HQ of the public-private partnership in the Ukraine. And I don't know as to if you saw this tracking separately. Did you run into Oracle and Metabiota in the same paragraph?
I've been running into Oracle left and right. I have a background in high tech in the financial world, so I've been running into Oracle left and right all of my career of 30 years. This is the first time I've ever heard a link between them and child trafficking, but it doesn't surprise me, being the fact that Oracle is into every single government in the world. They have government contracts with every single one of them for database and things like that.
Yes.
So it doesn't surprise me to find them smack dab in the middle of this as well.
Well, go ahead, Lisa. I was just going to say the track and trace patents and the IDs go back to what you're talking about, Lisa.
Well, and that's it. You know, when you have a database control center, and there are several, but when you've got an Oracle that's now come in and is manning and overseeing DHS, HHS, Department of Energy, the ID number, you know, these 16-digit barcoded, IP addresses are facilitating several responsibilities, but it is a track and trace. And so all of those agencies, in addition to the third-party private command centers that all have, their fingers and claws and incentives to be participating in the track and trace, it's overwhelming. The amount of influential technical powers that be that have access through the infiltration
Exactly.
of pharmaceuticals and vaccines.
Exactly that. And I want people, that are following along, sometimes we get an audience that gets engaged. Look up two search terms, put them into the same search thing: digital ID and distributed ledger. And where that actually leads you back to is what Lisa's talking about. When she says the barcodes are on these pathogens, she means all the way down to the molecular level. So the track and trace is a much bigger event than people think. And it is literally your genome with its own electronic signature is the digital ID that they want. And that hooks into what it was Metabiota and Oracle are doing all over the planet. It's not just Ukraine. But I saw a contract late last week that Oracle was tasked with a $2.53 billion contract to digitally ID everybody in India. So given that they could do that for $2.35 billion, all the Indians plus a billion people, then why is it that we need 500 billion for what it is they're going to do with Operation Stargate? What else do you know about that, S2?
Operation Stargate. Well, I know the thing that you had presented earlier about the psychic spy's abilities. So I've known about that. I've been tracking all of these conspiracy theories for years, and in fact, I've got a new T-shirt now that says I need a whole new set of conspiracy theories because all mine are true.
Well, they are neither conspiracies or theories. These were legalized experimentation on humans, not a theory at all. We have their documents. This actually happened, no different than the Tuskegee experiments and a half a dozen other ones where our government took it upon themselves to wholesale poison whole cities.
Well, what I do know about Oracle is that they actually were the creators of the social credit score database over in China.
This is important.
Yeah, it is.
So what does that entail? I'm gathering there's no other way to do this other than digital ID. Is that what they rolled out?
Yeah, basically, because they collected everybody's bioinformatic data, which, by the way, one of the projects that I worked on when I was at NIH, I was at the very ground level working side by side with scientists on the bioinformatics database. And that was when I got a clue that there's something really bad coming down the pike.
Yeah, you got that right. What else did I miss here, Lisa?
Well, we're just starting to uncover and making sense of the intent to eventually, and I'm sure I need to remove eventually because I'm sure it's already, administered and happening, is that the Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency will be tied into the bacteria and harnessing of energy, as a trading element, but also for data harvesting and data collecting and surveillance. But
data
the bacteria
harvesting.
What I think they're doing with this, and I think they've been doing this all along, and they've been telling us this through movies for decades. So we can go back to the movie The Matrix, where humans were used as energy sources.
Yeah.
Yep.
They basically put them in their little bubbles, and they used them for energy sources. And I believe that's what they're trying to tap into. And it's something. Well, and it's something interesting that I've tapped into over the last couple of years, just more of theory and things that I've gained information on about some of the things that Nikola Tesla was working on, where if we could take thermal energy and convert that into electrical energy, which I think is very possible. I've been laughed at by some people saying that, that's totally inefficient and things like that. And I'm like, no, it's
we have
not.
all kinds of papers on that. I mean, that's not even theory anymore. We've got a lot of peer-reviewed science on that very issue because it has to do with harnessing all manner of human activity as a power source. And not only that, but it's already happened. They have already accessed people's wireless body area networks. If you can imagine, there are international standards on this. The IEEE says, hey, if you're going to use a child as a power source, you can only do it for so much period of time in accordance with the UN's Declaration on the Rights of Children. So this is not only here, but this is mature and robust. This has been happening for a long time. It's implemented,
This was one of the visions that I had upon my initial vision, where I said that I saw events unfolding. A lot of different ideas popped into my head during that thing, and it's not the only time it's happened.
No.
So there's been other times when it's actually been prevented, where I couldn't see things.
If you haven't looked lately, ladies and gentlemen, go back to the Bill Gates patent. We'll put it up there. It's 20200606, and it talks about this harnessing people's bodies as cloud computing nodes and as power sources. And then we found there was a company called InPersona.com that had commercialized this. And I think Melissa probably has it, but they have since changed their web address, their web page, because we effectively caught them. That this technology is so robust, it had been commercialized. Thank you, Melissa. By the time we found this website, they had already harvested 1.4 trillion heartbeats to mine cryptocurrency. So this is the application.
Yeah, and something else that I found out interesting, looking around at Oracle too, is they actually have their own life sciences division within Oracle. So they've been in bed with this for years.
I just found a whole new section with the Department of Energy. Department of Energy and Oracle have been collaborating for quite some time, and there's a brand new section. So we have found as to Department of Energy is a huge head of this beast. I mean, there's many, but
Yes,
they have a database of over 500,000. It's just increased 500,000 primed radioactive pathogens, viruses, yeasts, fungi that are all digitalized, and they are software platforms. And those are going into, those are the platforms that are then primed with additional chemical compounds, which are then assigned these IP addresses. So it is all about energy.
It is all about energy.
And the ability to be able to manipulate. Those that have the ability to manipulate frequency and energy are the rulers of the world, because
And
they can.
And they will also be able to manipulate your thoughts.
Will be able. They are and have been. We actually found where the Defense Intelligence Agency stole the Russians' research on all this circa 1961 or something like that. It was a long time ago. And they had employed it ever since. And then, of course, when you add into the account that CIA is now releasing documents going back to Roswell and things of that nature, the UFO crashes, that they've had this technology, right, from off-world sources for 70, 80 years and just didn't tell us about it, right? So if you can imagine how advanced all of that is, and that's why you see such robust standards in the IEEE, even the WHO. We're just waking up to this, but they've been doing it for decades.
So, Lisa, is this IP addresses they were talking about specifically, or MAC addresses? Because MAC addresses are hard coded.
Well, in all the patents that we've disseminated, the IP addresses connect to a couple of different command centers, but Department of Energy's IBM supercomputer is where the majority of them are connect to, and you can I gather the patent summaries from the NIH PubChem library storage database. And so it's the chemical compound breakdown. So it's very, very technical, but it's based off of the bacteria that has been converted into synthetic software platforms, and then with the addition of the chemical compounds. And those connect directly to IBM's Department of Energy supercomputer, but they're 16-digit IP addresses. So whether, I guess I don't know if that's different than Mac, but Google is involved in that too. And then there's a couple of European countries that show up.
Google had entered everybody's, the people that got the shots are putting out MAC addresses when they're not barefoot. And that was and the 16-digit ones, and that's what was hooked into the Google Mesh network. But I think that there's an issue as it relates to the distributed ledger and the independent pieces of these pathogens that, believe it or not, are all traced back. And this is about money. This is about how do you apportion the money made by your SynBio person, whether that's by energy or cloud computing or otherwise, and how is that distributed? FTX was a crypto fund effectively over the Bahamas, where all of this was laid out with Bill Clinton and Tony Blair et al., in terms of being able to track and trace carbon outputs, as they called it, as a distributed ledger plus and minus to trade people's biorhythms.
You know what this
all
is.
Of that.
You know
Go
what this
ahead.
is, Todd. This is
Sure.
creature. This is the creature from Jekyll Island 2.0.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
It is. You're absolutely right about that. And you're talking about in the economic sense. You're absolutely right. This is another means of enslaving humanity. Last time it was with the global debt model economy, and this time it's with control over your physical being. You're absolutely right.
Of all of humanity, that's the zoonotic platforms. They've created those
Important.
Intentionally so that we can ebb and flow, all of humanity. Mankind can transfer these either through shedding or through the mRNAs and through the vaccines, so that they will flow back and forth into a one. We're viewed as microorganisms to those that are
into what you didn't say. The other part of that, when you say zoonotic, what that means is these pathogens go between species.
Yes.
That's the issue. So they were giving cows tuberculosis with a zoonotic version that they had created. Lisa found it. And next thing you know, a farmer shows up or a rancher shows up with what? The very same malady. It's hardly any different from smallpox. Everywhere you see an outbreak of these diseases, it's preceded by a vaccine test of some kind. So zoonotic, you're absolutely right, Lisa. The one thing that you said is really important here, and I hope people understand it, that they view us, whoever they is, as just a genome, right? We're not people. We're no different than a cow or anything else. And Lisa dug up, and I don't know if you've got it, but the taxonomy of Homo sapiens, taxonomy of humans, and it says the definition of a human is, quote unquote, a species to be experimented upon.
Research, an analysis of research-based units.
I don't know what that one was. Did that go back to specific absorption rates?
No, that's just, they analyze the experiments.
I see.
We're experimental commodities that then that those experiments turn into, analytical data, and then that becomes, the world that we're living in. And it does, another thing too that I just wanted to mention is that it's so interesting now, and things are moving very rapidly, that especially with this new mRNA, the cancer cure, and hopefully it is
the cancer. What you mean?
Cure.
The disease that was already cured? That one?
Well, I was responding to, and I'm working on a response to you and a couple of others, in the incredible email chain that we were on, a conversation, and it's, so here's this technology that's being promoted. I'm assuming that you're going to have regular boosters to keep that cancer at bay. It's not just a one-time shot. Does it, and it says that it can be designed for each and every one of us. Well, if you're diagnosed with one cancer and then something comes up a year later, does that same mRNA work, or is that a whole other new?
We know the answer to that, because what we came to understand is that the COVID shots replaced people's killer T cells. Those are the ones that eradicate cancer. And they replaced them with what are called synthetic B cells. Effectively, they took antivirus software from a computer and they digitized it and put it into the people. So now everybody's wondering why it is they get turbo cancer amongst other maladies, because your T cells were eliminated by the shots. That's why. And it looks to me, Lisa, just what you'd said, that it's in preparation for introduction, of new pathogens. And then the B cells will either work or not work depending on their programming. And you've got to go back to, just like now, you get a virus on your computer. What are you going to do? Update. So you're right. Updates, monthly updates. Did you get your mRNA this time? And so it makes sense when you see them building these mRNA factories all over the planet. I mean, in the deepest, darkest parts of Africa, parts unknown to this world now have mRNA factories. So they're going to digitize your programming locally. Right. So when I hear these doctors talking about decentralized medicine, that's what they're talking about.
Yep.
your upgrades.
That's what the distributed ledger is. It's blockchain.
Well,
exactly
and we
what
just
that is.
found that we found it's a bio blockchain that the WEF is got that architectural manuscript that they're working on that will do that and harness that and implement that. And when you were talking as to about the matrix, and plugging in and being in your little cube at night to rejuvenate and rejuice, we're being infiltrated with that system. I mean, it is a synthetic technology, and it doesn't, by the end of the assembly line, there is nothing organic about that vaccine or anything about curing.
Yeah, that's right. It's not designed. They never cure. They don't want to cure, because as soon as you cure a disease, then they're out of business.
There's no money in the cure.
There's no money. That's
Right.
exactly right. So before we get to some more questions from Melissa and the rest of it, use your crystal ball as to tell us what happens next, and where do we go to stop this madness?
Well, truthfully, I think, and this is just my assessment based on things that I've noticed, I think Project Stargate was announced as an exposure operation. And the reason I say that is, first, there's a level of common sense that has to be attained here. If Larry Ellison is coming on public television and saying, we're going to give you an injection and in 48 hours, we're going to be able to cure cancers. Okay, where is the common sense here that for the last 5 years, we've been screaming from the rooftops, where are the tests and trials? You're telling me that you're going to be able to develop a vaccine within 48 hours that's going to cure cancer in somebody without doing any testing whatsoever. That's the first level of common sense that has to be attained. Secondly, one of the things that I noticed when that was announced was all of a sudden there was a trending search that was going on last week when this was announced, and it had to do with Larry Ellison. And everybody was out there doing research on Larry Ellison. Who is this guy? Nobody knew who he was. All of us in high tech knew who he was, but with that search going on, now we're starting to see a lot of exposing information come out about him. And I'm here to tell you, that guy will sell his mother for $1 if it'll make him $1 million.
What if it makes him $2?
That too. Another important part of this picture that I think needs to be paid attention to as well. Lisa, did you ever run across a company called Thermo Fisher Scientific in your research?
Yes, I have.
Well, I believe there is a new quantum dot factory that has been refitted out in Greenville, North Carolina, where they're manufacturing those quantum dots. I have, I had some people on the inside there that were saying that they had a bunch of people come. They had a bunch of new equipment that was shipped in from Germany, of all places, and they were really, really hush hush about setting up that equipment within this plant, and even to the point where only the German scientists that were there were going to be able to touch that equipment.
Wow.
Borg particles. Believe it or not, it all goes back to Borg particles and quantum particle mechanics.
Well, here's another piece. Here's another piece for you. They just stood up a new plant out in Mebane, North Carolina. Now, I don't know what that plant is, but I suspect it has something to do with that.
So,
Yeah.
Well, and this probably has to do, North Carolina, with the massive lithium deposits and
Yes,
the
I thought you were
silicon
gonna
quartz
say that.
deposits that have been discovered. I mean, they were there, but all along the baseline and the path of Helene. I mean, that is a magnetic force that is to be reckoned with.
Oh, that's another rabbit hole we can go down in Western North Carolina. There are things that I found out about that through my own, shall we say, digging around. That essentially my conclusion was they used the NEXRAD system to drive that hurricane.
Oh, for sure,
that's right.
probably.
I
would imagine as too that these companies are, and I'll look into it and find out if they are, the Tennessee Authority, Electrical Authority
Tennessee
company
Valley
that owns,
Authority.
That controls that private company, private-public company that controls massive areas, the electrical grid there.
Yeah.
Well, did you know that 17 of the 22 NEXRAD sites were owned by the DoD?
Oh, the ones
I-
in North Carolina makes perfect sense.
No, nationwide.
No, I did not
17,
know that.
17 of those sites are owned by the DoD.
17 out of how many?
I forget how many there are. They're all over the United States. I think I saw 53, and the rest of them are owned by the National Weather Service. But one of the disturbing things that I found was the day before that hurricane hit, the National Weather Service had removed, or actually they didn't remove it, they moved their NEXRAD reporting site to something that was not necessarily hidden but not easily found. They took it off of their main site and moved it to something else that was actually not well known by the public. I found it. And when I found it, it's also public information. You can get into the log files of each one of these NEXRAD sites. And I found things in those log files, particularly the ones that were down around North Carolina and down the Gulf of Mexico. The the things that I found in there were things like security has been disabled, unauthorized access.
Really?
What else? What else did I find? Root password is expired. When I saw root password is expired, that was kind of when I knew that there was an exploit that had been run on those systems.
Oh,
And
wow.
you see me jotting all this down. I'm
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
maniac
no
over
surprise here. All right, well, before we run out of time, Melissa, if you feel like coming back, I'd be interested. Well, you always have good questions. I want to hear what you've got to ask. Go
I'm
ahead,
asking questions
Lisa.
today. Oh, she's
Oh,
got
you are
one here.
doing it. Fine, run with it.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested in the camps that you found. Are you helping out at all with or noticed or can comment as to on the children being taken away? Speaking of North Carolina and Helene victims, I mean, they intentionally haven't put families into assisted housing or homes or temporary housing, and then Child Protective Services has come in to take some of these children. I mean, is that all part of like what you were talking about earlier with, or Todd, also with the quarantine camps? I mean, that's a similar situation, almost like a quarantine camp in tents, and then going in and taking kids.
Well, I can't really say definitively that that's the reason why that's going on. Um, I know there's a lot of nefarious actors in the North Carolina government, and I'm also working with Doc Pete on some of this stuff. I feed him intel as well, so I'm kind of tied into him as well when I run across things. Um, I personally think the whole thing was about the land grab because Asheville was slated to be a 15-minute city. So that whole region there was designed to be set up as a bunch of 15-minute cities, and then Trump's coming in and saying right now that, okay, well, we're going to take care of this and we're going to take care of it fast. We're going to get housing rebuilt down in that area. Guess what the housing is going to be? Furnished apartments.
Yeah, own nothing, be happy.
Yeah. And your job is going to be, you're going to go mine lithium for us.
Yep.
Well, better than eating crickets and being a cloud computing node.
Well, you'll be that at the same time.
Yeah, you'll do that too. Play video games. Lord Almighty.
Yes. So would you like to talk a little bit about, or just mention some of the things that you did with Major Prather and his operation?
Yeah, before we
that's
run
very
out of time.
Well, some of the things that we did, like the October 7th thing that happened over in Israel with Hamas, that was one of the things that I did a lot of analyzation on before he broke that story. And basically, I came to the conclusion that there was no way in the world that just happened. That had been planned, and sure enough, a lot of the data that I uncovered out there proved that had been planned for 1 to 2 years in advance. That's one of the things that I've done out there. There's just been so much stuff that the world has been running at breakneck speed, and I keep a lot of files on everything. I didn't initially because it was just things that was like, oh yeah, it's out here, it's in the air. I'm just going to go ahead and grab it and I'll give it to him. But even down to the point of where with Trump's first assassination attempt, well, I should say it was his 10th assassination attempt because in total they had tried to kill him 13 times.
13?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I didn't either.
Yeah. But with his first assassination attempt, I did a lot of deep digging on that. And there were some people out there that they were harassing this poor kid Yurik down in Arizona. And it was just like, what are you doing? I mean, I went back in this kid's social media for 13 years. And yeah, he owned an online presence, FFL, but never did anything with it. The guy was a car guy. I'm like, why are you harassing this kid down in Arizona trying to connect him to Maxwell Yurik? Well, going back and looking at everything, Maxwell Yurik and Matthew Crooks are probably both in the Allegheny River by now.
Wow.
So that was a lot of the deep digging that I do there. Basically, anything that JP would need information wise from me, he could put out a request for information from me, and I could pretty much easily find most of the stuff that he wanted within a matter of minutes. So that's really what I did, and giving him that information. A lot of times, we don't know for sure that this is what had happened, but I think we interdicted quite a few false flags as a result of putting some of this information out, and that's really what my job was to try to dig out information, assess, and then interdict.
Well, that's exactly the kind of information that helps people put a stop to this. So going back to the original thing we were talking about in Cochise County, the reason why the Board of Supervisors voted down the quarantine camp is because of guys like you, making them aware, hey, this little step is part of a bigger plan. And if people can see that, it's a way to stop it. And that's exactly what happened. The Board of Supervisors in Cochise County said, no, take your intergovernmental agreement and your $1.9 million and go somewhere else. And I think that's the value of what it is that you're doing, S2, and to get it out as much as you can. And that's certainly the point of today, is to share your knowledge and thinking. And of course, always welcome on CloutHUB. We will not censor. And by the way, your phone has worked fine today, or your link, because I know a lot of times it gets interrupted. So let that be a testimony to how it is that we do things at CloutHUB. We're not going to censor. We're happy to get the information out so we can connect those dots.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that little piece. Anytime I talk about things that the powers that be don't like, I have one of two things that happens. My internet connection starts to go hairy, or I'll have a gaggle of Apache helicopters fly over my house as kind of hey, we know what you're talking about. We're listening.
Yeah. You get a little bit unnerving, for sure. All right, Lisa, we're closing out the rest of this hour. Last one. What have you got? Oh, did she freeze?
Yeah, she's froze up.
Holy smokes. I was going to ask her what her last question was for you. So with that said, we are out of time. S2, thank you for coming. Thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for sharing and what it is you do to share with others. I hope that you won't stop. Keep doing it, because we need more like it. And please know CloutHUB is your outlet too for anybody and everybody. You also can have a channel. You also can do your videos. We love to have them. And by the way, when you share that information, you may not understand just how important it is. If you wake up something in somebody's mind, they may be that proverbial one, right? The one to stop something. So please, folks, we're in the business of ideas. The marketplace of ideas lives here. So please be a part of that. Share it like S2 did. Lisa, as always, thanks for being here. S2, always a pleasure, brother. It's been an honor to work with you.
This is what I do. I'm the free radical in the bloodstream of all of the nastiness that's going on.
Be the radical,
yes,
brother.
Leading the charge. That's
Beautiful.
excellent.
All right, with that said, CloutHUB family, Vaxxchoice family, thanks for being here. Please, if you would, share this. If you found anything interesting that might spark an idea in somebody else, please send it out to all your contacts and bring people to CloutHUB, where, by the way, CloutHUB 2 is on the way. You're going to really enjoy this experience. So it's free, it's unbridled, unencumbered. God, guns, and country is our motto. God bless everybody.
God bless. Nice to meet you, S2.